Shalom Aleichem, Chanukah Sameach, and welcome to Stark Tank, the podcast about the challenges and opportunities of being a Ben Torah in the workforce. This week, we have a special Chanukah episode with my good friend, Rav Shlomo Rayman. The text of Al Hanisim is mainly a description of the military campaign of the Chashmonaim. I wanted to get Shlomo's perspective on a few of the ideas from this tefillah, because he is a Talmid Chacham who has spent lots of time fighting for the Jewish people over the last year and few months. You will hear about learning Torah under difficult circumstances, seeing miracles in Gaza, and Shlomo's intense Chanukah experience last year. We recorded this last week, just before Chanukah and just before Shlomo returned to another round of Miluim. Shlomo is in Gaza as I record this. May Hashem bless and protect him along with all of our soldiers. I also want to give a shout out to Shlomo's wife Eliza and his kids Nava and Aaron. So many families continue to sacrifice so much in this war, and I hope that everyone listening to this takes a moment to appreciate that. My name is Yaakov Wolf. This is Stark Tank. My good friend, Rav Shlomo Rayman, welcome to Stark Tank. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Yaakov. It's a pleasure to be here.
So you are not exactly a Ben Torah in the workforce. You are a Rav. You learn and you teach in Yeshiva and Yeshivat Leif HaTorah. But I want to have you on as Chanukah approaches because there are a number of topics that come up with regards to Chanukah and specifically in Al Hanisim that I thought you would have a unique perspective on. You've spent a lot of time over the last 15 or so months in the army. Do you have like a count, a scoreboard of how many days you've spent in Miluim and how many days in Gaza, or have you lost track by this point?
I tell people 6 months. That's an estimate. And I don't remember how many days were actually in Gaza and how many days were off at home in between the stints into Gaza. But I just want a disclaimer. I'm not a Rav yet. I'm waiting for my last results for my last Rabbanut test, which I took a couple months ago. I'm still waiting for the results.
And that last test was the test that you studied for while in Gaza?
Yes. So if I fail, I have a good excuse,
So we'll get back to that in 1 second. So let's just take a step back. We say in Al Hanisim, we say, B'zeidim biyad oskei Torasecha. So a person could take that to mean broadly that our side, the Jewish people, we are considered the nation of the Torah, and we have people who are sitting in yeshiva, and therefore our fight is a fight on behalf of our Jewish Torah values, and that's why it's Zeidim biyad oskei Torasecha. But more literally, it could be taken to mean that the actual fighters are also considered oskei Torasecha. And you started out in the Keren B'Yavneh Hesder program, and now you're involved in the Leif HaTorah Hesder program. So how have you experienced that concept of oskei Torasecha being on the front lines and the fighters during your time fighting in this war?
So I think it's very important, this idea, because there's this misconception out there that if you want to learn Torah, you can't be a fighter also. And these are two separate worlds, and you have to kind of choose between them. And I think that's a false dichotomy. I think for sure, oskei Torasecha could continue fighting. And not only that, I think in some ways, a army experience, maybe even the terrible war experience, could actually improve one's Torah learning and one's Ben Torah status. I think they could complement each other. I'll talk more about the war experience than the Hesder experience because that's more fresh on my mind. But in my unit, we had about 6 or 7 abrichim and rabbanim, and you could see that these people were really, while fighting, in between, when they had a break, when, they didn't need to rest anymore, they would really learn. We had someone make a siyum on Meseches Shviat Yerushalmi. We had 2 people take Rabbanut tests that they studied for during their time in Gaza. We had a whole bunch of people keep up Daf Yomi. So there's a lot of Torah learning going on, and this isn't a new phenomenon. You mentioned Al Hanisim, that the Zeidim biyad oskei Torasecha. I could also think back to David HaMelech. David HaMelech, fought wars, and he was considered, especially in the eyes of Chazal, as a top-notch, osek Torah, to the point where there's the famous story in the Gemara Megillah based on the Psukim in Yoshua. So, I'm going from David HaMelech to Yoshua. Also, a leader, right? Everything we know about Talmud Torah, we learn from, not everything. A lot of what we learned about Talmud Torah, we learned from Yoshua. Yoshua, V'gisa bo yomam v'layla, is about Yoshua. So he's definitely a Torah learner. He was the one who fought the first wars. And the Gemara Megillah tells us that he actually got rebuked during the war for not learning Torah. The Malach came with a sword outstretched and said, I think to kill him. I think that's the implication there. And Yoshua asked, well, what sin did I do that you're coming to kill me? This was right the first night after they started their siege on Yericho. And the Malach says, or Yeshua offers two options, either Talmud Torah, Bittul Talmud Torah, or Bittul the Karban Talmud. And the Malach says, Atabati, I came now for the sin of Talmud Torah. So we see that Yeshua got rebuked for not learning Torah. So not only is Talmud Torah by the soldiers, by those fighting, important, it seems to be so critical to the point where the Malach was coming to kill Yeshua, which is a huge tzarchiyim. Of all times that there's a tour of Talmud Torah, it should be when you're at war. This is a podcast about balancing Torah and the workforce. So you said I don't have a standard day job, but I think 6 months in Miluim counts. You could tell me what you think.
So what are like some of the practical takeaways that you take as to how does that work? How are people able to commit to their learning and be so committed? And what are some of the lessons that listeners can take to their own lives wherever they may be trying to struggle to keep Torah at a central spot in their life?
Right. So that's a great question. And I thought about it a lot. I think there are some kind of outlooks that could affect, meaning how you look at Torah learning, how you look at your job or war or milchama. And I think there are also some very practical things about the situation. When it comes to outlook, I think when you realize how much your Torah learning gives towards your fighting, and I think this goes back to why it was so important for Yeshua to learn. Torah learning is what teaches us how to fight, why to fight. I think mostly more than the how, but the why. Right? It gives us reason to fight. It reminds us about Am Yisrael and reminds us about Torah Yisrael and what we're fighting for. And it gives you a lot of strength. So when you see that what you're doing in your day-to-day is not some b'diavad, okay, someone's trying to kill us, you have to kill them. Okay, I need to make a living. But you view it as, a way for you to fulfill the Torah, right? By making a parnasa, by fighting in the war. So then Talmud Torah is just a natural expression of that. Of course, you're going to be learning in your free time. It's all part of the same mission. It's not two separate missions of Talmud Torah and Avoda, right? Torah and Avoda are part of the same mission of Avodat Hashem, and it doesn't make sense to split between them. And you need them to enhance each other. I think practically why there was so much Talmud Torah in Gaza, number one, peer pressure. 100%. You're with 8 other guys and you have a couple hours free and one person brings out the sefer where you're going to go play cards, So peer pressure played a huge factor in it. I don't know how to replicate that in everyone's workforce, but peer pressure was huge. Not having too many responsibilities also was a huge help. Meaning in normal life, I assume, meaning my experience in my normal life, is that there's so much going on, you're kind of almost always overwhelmed. You have to balance between work and family and the social life and 100 other things that are going on. And it's very hard to be like, okay, I could learn. You really got to be kovea those itim, set aside time, because it's not just going to come when you have free time. Something that's nice about the army is you don't have your phone. You're kind of cut out from everything. You have one mission, and that is to be successful in your job in the army. And when you've accomplished that, or when there's a pause, because the army is like 20% chaos and then 80% waiting for that chaos to start. And, you have to wait. There are a lot of moving parts. So there's a lot of dead time. And in that dead time, you don't really have other responsibilities to fill in. Well, I think it's important I don't know how to replicate this in regular life. I'm still trying to figure that out. But if you have, one job and it's defined time and it's defined mission, and when you finish that, you're not overwhelmed with 100 other things. So that really helps. So that is for sure one of the secrets of why my unit, me and my friends were able to learn. I really think it has to do with not having too much going on, which is funny. You think in war, you'd have the least amount of time. And the last point is to be very mission focused. If you have a Rabbanut test that you're studying for, right? So it's not just, okay, I'm studying, you have a goal that you're reaching for and you have a deadline. And you have a amount that you need to finish. Daf yomi, set for yourself a goals and deadlines, and something that you really want to accomplish. I think that also really helps you take advantage of. Obviously, you're tired. Obviously, there are other things going on, but it's part of your. You have a specific thing that you want to accomplish.
One of the things that I personally think about a lot, struggle with a lot, and I think a lot of our listeners also, is that sometimes there'll be a situation, or oftentimes will be a situation where a person really wants to learn and they really feel that the learning is very important to them, but they have a lot of other things going on and, important things that they're supposed to be doing, things that are mitzvahs. So that can be very disappointing for someone who really feels attached and connected to their learning, but they just feel frustrated. They're not able to accomplish those goals and to reach the levels that they think they should be reaching. So I'm wondering, is that something that you or others have dealt with in the Army? I really want to be learning X amount, but now I'm in the Army, so there's a nice amount, but it's still maybe not enough, and that could still lead to a sense of frustration and despair.
For sure. Like the chavrusa that I learned for the Rabbanu test. So he really wanted to do one of the bigger tests, Isser Heter, Shabbos, I don't remember which one. But he realized that would be too much while he was in Gaza. So he did a smaller test, meaning he adjusted his goals to fit the time he thought he'd have. So you obviously need to be realistic about what your goal is and figure out the timing. But if you have a realistic goal, right, I feel like, yeah, you could do it. Is there disappointment? Again, it depends. If you're viewing that your real main mission in life is to learn, is to learn all day, and Nebuch, I have to go to defend Am Yisrael. Nebuch, I have to go for a job. So yeah, you're going to be disappointed that you're only learning one Masechta and not four. But if your goal is to fulfill the Torah in all of its parts, which includes supporting your family, which includes defending Am Yisrael, because man ve'et, you have the appropriate Talmud Torah for that time. So there shouldn't be this disappointment. I'm doing mitzvos tios ba'aretz, which is only 10 simanim, and I could be doing the 40s, 50 simanim of 100 simanim of Hilchos Shabbos. Okay, now's not the time for Hilchos Shabbos. Now's the time for something a little bit lighter. So is there a disappointment? Yeah, but if you have a more klal outlook that, this is the right thing for the right time, so then I think that disappointment should dissipate.
Another thing I wanted to ask you, the slogan for this podcast is the challenges and opportunities of being a mentor in the workforce. So in any situation, it could be the same thing, which is on the one hand, a challenge, also an opportunity. And on that note, and you already discussed a number of the special, unique opportunities that you've had amongst the challenges. Another thing is some of the Kedushay Torah that you've been writing up recently that have come up, that have come really as a direct result and would probably never have come to light if not for the situation you found yourself in Gaza. So maybe you could give us a little bit of a brief overview of what those stories were and what the sugyas that came up were.
Yeah, sure. So I called the collection of, right now it's 2 essays. Hopefully we'll get a lot more. I'm called Torah Giborim, the Torah of heroes. Giborim is Gematria 271, which is our Gdud, or Hanasakavi Gdud Shtaim Sheva Achad 271. So that's just the cute name for it. But there were a lot of fascinating questions that came up in the Army. There were a lot of fascinating Hidushei Torah that came up in the Army, and I felt like we can't forget them. So I had a little notebook with me, and every time there was a chidush, if someone said a Dvar Torah, or thought of something, or there was a discussion going on, so I would quickly jot it down, and I hope to put them all out. The one I'm working on now, I just came out with one on Chanukah. There we had a fascinating halakhic question, not even a Chanukah question, but on the first night of Chanukah, it was actually a little bit of a sad story, a sad story. A friend of one of the soldiers in our unit, Kobe Dvash, was killed when we were conquering Khan Yunis. That night, it was the first night of Hanukkah. So I could talk maybe a little bit later about the Dvar Torah that was given at Hanukkah candles that night. That really gave a lot of chizuk. But the halachic question that came up that night is someone decided to, with a little bit of rice that we had and onions, and we had a little bit of gas, he decided to cook a meal to give strength to the chaylim who were mourning their friends. And he cut the onions, not with the knife that we kashered, but with a knife that wasn't kashered. And a non-kosher knife with onions was a pretty big problem. And he came to me saying, can I feed these this rice onion mixture that was used with not kosher vessels? Kalim, can I give it to the soldiers? So we had a little tribunal there, a couple of rabbanim, and we went through the sugya, and we ended up being matir, and it was a fascinating discussion. But you could read it. I could share it afterwards, maybe in the show notes. We could share the article. So I wrote about that. Another big one, and I think it's unique for an example of a unique Dvar Torah that can come out of the Army, is how to relate to chilonim, to non-religious soldiers. Because in regular life, the way that I guess in Israel things are set up, and I'm assuming in America it's very similar, that you kind of hang out with people that are similar to you. So questions about how to relate to chilonim, who are different than us, is like theoretical. Those chilonim that I see once in a while, or even if you work, it's like, I know that work relationship is probably different than an Army relationship when you're with them literally 24/7, when you have to trust them with your life. We become best friends. And for example, so we're studying the psukim in the Torah of the Kohen, who gives a speech to Bnei Yisrael before they go out to war. Decided that's appropriate to learn before we go out to war. And the Kohen starts off his speech with the word Shema Yisrael, Hear O Israel. And Rashi there quotes a Gemara, quoting Rav Shlomo Rayman, that Shema Yisrael is a hint to the prayer Shema Yisrael. Shema Yisrael, Shem Elokeinu, Shem Echad. And b'schut, the fact that we say Shema Yisrael, we're going to win the war. So while it's very nice when half your machlaka says Shema Yisrael, so great, we have a merit. But what about, our brothers in arms who don't say Shema Yisrael every day? What's their merit? And it really forced us to think, because we're not going to war when with our brothers in arms who if they don't have a zchut, so we needed to be melamed zchut on them. And so we sat and we thought, and I think we came out with a pretty important chidush. I can share with you now if you like. It can be brief. Like, on one foot, we used to think that Shema Yisrael is two ideas. Is one idea, sorry. Hashem is one. That's the idea of Shema Yisrael. And it's funny, we call it Shema Yisrael where it doesn't even mention Hashem. That's the end of the line. Shema Yisrael is kind of like an introduction. But if you notice the piyut that we say after Tachanun, Shomer Yisrael, Shomor Sheret Yisrael, Vayivad Yisrael, Omrim Shema Yisrael, God protects Israel those who say Shema Yisrael. The second line is Shomer Goy Echad, Ham Yachdim Shimcha Hashem Elokeinu Shem Echad. So this piyut, this tefillah splits the Shema into two. There's a zchut of saying Shema Yisrael, and there's a zchut of saying Hashem Elokeinu Shem Echad. And these are two separate ideas. That idea number one is Hear O Israel, which we took to mean someone who realizes they're part of Am Yisrael and cares about Am Yisrael, and also the theological declaration of Hashem Echad. So there are two ideas here. So yes, our Achenu Chilonim don't say Hashem Echad for whatever reason, but they do say Shema Yisrael. They're literally risking their lives for the Jewish people. We compare that a little bit to just really profound, because our enemies, Hamas, Hezbollah, when they go to war, they scream out Akbar, God is great. And it just struck me that the difference between our cry of Shema Yisrael and their cry is, our cry starts off with a care for Yisrael, for human beings, for human life. Meaning that Bein Adam Lechavero in Judaism is a prerequisite for Kabbalas Malchus Shemayim. That's like saying V'ahavta l'recha kamocha before you say Shema Yisrael, according to the Kabbalists. And it could be if you just have Hashem Echad without that Shema Yisrael, you could do things in the name of God, like October 7th, doing insane things. So this Shema Yisrael aspect is so important, that Bein Adam Lechavero aspect. Before we get to Hashem Echad, we need to really be able to say Shema Yisrael. So this idea came out, I think, uniquely because of our perspective in the army.
That's very interesting. So we're almost out of time, and I appreciate you taking the time. We're actually heading back to Miluim in a couple of days, and so I appreciate you squeezing this into your schedule. So just one or two more things before we wrap up. The first is going back to the beginning of the prayer, obviously, Al Hanisim, right? We talk about miracles, and there's the Nes Pach Hashemen, which is this completely supernatural miracle, but there's also the military victory, or we're not aware of any completely, beyond Teva miracles. So how do you think about that relationship? And based on what you saw in Gaza, right, did you see any crazy revealed miracles, or how do you think about the relationship between our military efforts and Ishtadlus and our...
That's a great question. I personally did not see anything that I would call, a supernatural miracle. People really want the supernatural miracles. You're not the first one to ask me this question. I've gotten this question a lot. Like, did you see any miracles? And I don't know exactly what they want. Do they want some amazing coincidence? Like, there was a case where we were going to, conquer a certain area. We were going with some soldiers, some tanks, and everything to conquer. And a guy came out with an RPG, an enemy, a Hamas guy, shot it and missed. And he ran away. The next day, they were thinking about going back, but they didn't want to send tanks for whatever reason. And we were arguing that we needed to go with tanks. And someone said, yesterday we had a miracle, that the RPG missed, but you can't rely on that. And we need to properly return to this location in the proper way. And then someone else, when he heard that this guy called that a miracle, he said, did you mean statistics? Right? So there was like this, that could be viewed as a miracle, but it's also statistically RPGs miss sometimes. So that's definitely a tension that there was a little bit. And I think that's a tension that people really want the open miracles. You saw it after Iran attack. There were all these Facebook posts about how it was an open miracle. And the way that I look at these things, again, I think we're in a point in history where we no longer have the supernatural miracles. That was the time for Mitzrayim. Mitzrayim was the open miracles. I think we're now in the Tkufa of Purim, where it's non-supernatural miracles, where it's God running things from behind the scenes. And we're used to thinking of that as like a lower level. I wish we were back in the Pesach times. Nebuch, We're in the Purim times. But I think that's not correct. The Psukim say in Devarim that the outlook we should have is Hu anotein lecha koach la'asot chayil. You're not supposed to say kochi v'otzim yadi. Oh, I'm so powerful, and I was the one who did this chayil, this victory. But rather, God is the one who gave you the strength to do the victory. And people want that God does it by Himself. There are also Psukim like that. Hashem yilachem lachem imoivechem. God will fight alone. You won't do anything. But I think the focus that we should have, and I think it might even be on a greater level, is yeah, we don't have those supernatural miracles, but we have the miracle that God gave us called the IDF. You can imagine, 100 years ago, the Jews in Europe could imagine that in 100 years, they'll have their own army and the strongest army in the Middle East. Rab and Miyad Ma'atim, we used to think it's like super miraculous that the Miyut, somehow was able to have supernatural strength. David, and Goliath. Now we have one fighter plane, right? Could, take out 1,000 Hamas guys. It's literally Rabin Biyad Ma'atim, because of the technology that God gave us and because of the success that God gave us. So I feel like the fact that God gave us the ability to defend ourselves is like a huge, and even, that's a miracle on a level that we don't need to rely on the supernatural miracle. So I think that's how to look at these things. That don't look for those open miracles. And we have one right in front of us. It's called the IDF. That's the open miracle that God gave us. And we should appreciate that, and we should be thankful for that. And hopefully God will just make us stronger and stronger.
Okay, as we approach Chanukah, as you mentioned before, it's also the yahrzeit of your comrade who was lost on Erev Chanukah, if I recall correctly. So tell us a little bit what it's like to light Chanukah candles the first night in Gaza, away from your family, coming off of such a tragedy.
Right. So that was really tough, obviously. Without connection to Chanukah, it's a really tough situation. Kobe Dvash was very special soldier. He was always the first one to arrive at Miluim, even though he lived all the way up north, and our training was always down south. He would sleep over at his parents' or his friend's house in order to make it there first. And in Miluim, you don't have to be, especially if you live far away, you don't have to do that. He came to everything. He was, I don't remember his exact age, but he was over 40. He totally could have gotten out of Miluim, but it was really important to him. And as we mentioned, he was shot as we were conquering Khan Yunis. And I remember that night, besides the fact that it's Hanukkah candles, away from your family, but it's after such a tragedy, you're going to go and, do religious imperatives. You can do a mitzvah. It's kind of like an onein is pater from mitzvahs. They say it's a little bit of, some of the Rishonim explain that it's a not kavod hameis to be dealing with mitzvahs then. And we felt that, we weren't halachically onein. We weren't technically related. We weren't able to bury him. He was already taken out of Gaza. So we had to light the candles, but it was definitely, it was difficult to find meaning. And the idea that we shared that night was, we lit inside the house, obviously. Now in Israel, most listeners from Israel, America on this podcast, for some reason, a lot of people still light inside, but the original halacha is you're supposed to light outside. You're supposed to light outside the front door. Petach, patuach l'reshut harabim. It's supposed to be open to the reshut harabim. And only in times of danger, b'shat sakana, we light inside. The fact that we were lighting inside, obviously, we had to cover up all the windows so no light would get out. It kind of gave me strength. It reminded me that for thousands of years, the Jewish people have been lighting inside, right, in times of danger. And they didn't give up. They didn't stop. They weren't you know what, there's danger. We have so many tzaras. Forget about Hanukkah candles. No matter what, we're going to keep going. Can't do it outside, we'll do it inside. I think that's one of the messages behind Chanukah itself. There's Beis Yosef's famous question where he asked, we found enough oil to last one night. So what in the world was the miracle? Meaning the next 7 days there was a miracle. The oil lasted longer than it should, but the first night there was no miracle. The first night the candle lit as they were supposed to. And one of the famous answers is the fact that they even found oil in the first place. But I think the depth of that answer is the fact that we even looked for oil. That was not an easy year to be a Jew. With all the Gzeras, they didn't even keep Sukkot that year, according to Sefer Makkavim. A lot of terrible times. And they could have given up. They could have said, you know what? Let's stop rebelling. Let's just become a part of the Greeks, the Syrian, whatever, technical, historical, who exactly they were. But we decided that we're not giving up, and we're gonna fight for our Beit HaMikdash. We're gonna search for a candle. We're gonna light whatever we can. So the fact that the Jewish people, their ruach of wanting to be Jewish. And the fact that they didn't give up, I think that, and they found the oil, I think that's the miracle the first night. And that's the message of Hanukkah. And in my idea, this is a greater miracle. This spirit that the Jewish people have, again, we keep on going back to the the supernatural miracle versus the naturalized miracles. And that the supernatural miracle of oil, it lasted 7 days, and if we didn't have it, okay, we wouldn't have written in the, Ones or Chmona Patre, Tuma Otra B'tzibur. We would have figured it out. But the ruach that God gave the Jewish people, the spirit that we had, that we didn't give up, and that we went and we found oil, and that we fought for our self-governance. And 2,000 years later, we fought again, and we came back to this country, and we're not giving up. And Hamas gave us a nice little sucker punch, on October 7th, and we're not giving up, and we're going to come back even stronger from that. So I think that's a continuation of the same miracle that started Hanukkah, stayed with us throughout thousands of years of galut, of lighting inside, and it's continuing today in times of, hopefully of redemption, where we could keep on not giving up and keep on fighting for the safety and the success and the growth of the Jewish people.
That's a beautiful message, Shlomo. I want to thank you publicly for your lengthy service on behalf of all of us in Klal Yisrael, and wish you much bracha and atzlacha. The next round should go by quickly and successfully, and we look forward to hearing from you more in the future.
Amen. And Yaakov, I want to say kol hakavod on this podcast. I love the concept. I love everything you're doing. Me and Yaakov are great friends. We didn't even mention that. We go way back, and it's a pleasure always. And we got to keep in touch. We got to do more of these conversations on the air or off the air. And really appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you.